in the mobile service rig today. We're going out to work on a 1957 Ranchero. Again, it needs a new wiring harness. We're going to take care of that, so come along for the ride. We have a full wiring kit for this car we're going to be starting to install. It's Ron Francis, but it's complete. It's got everything right down to a new voltage regulator we got here. So this is good. All the wires are labeled, and we have somewhere around here we have a wiring diagram, which I appear to have lost already, but you know, where did I put it? Oh, here's the wiring diagram. Somebody had started this project, as you can see, and then they did not continue with it. But we have the wiring diagram. Each wire is labeled and color-coded, so we should be able to recreate this wiring loom. And there's some issues with the old one that, you know, there's some wires here that, yeah, it's got some issues. I think we need to replace this brake switch. Not sure about that. We'll have to check that out. And of course, we're just going to be basically replacing all the wires and all the electrical items in here today. Well, not today, over the course of the next couple days, whatever. There's the other ends of those coils. So hopefully we won't have to rip too much apart. So it looks like the way this is organized is color-coded and labeled. So we're basically going to start at the front of the car, and we're going to lay it out and work backwards. So we're going to horn in the headlights are in the very front, and the voltage regulator and so forth. And we're going to work our way back to probably the driver's side and the passenger side separately. We'll have to see if it works out. So let's start in the front and start kind of pulling them off and seeing what we need working back here. Okay, so when the harness comes through the firewall, it splits off two main ways here, across the firewall and then back around, and that's engine, ignition, and battery things. And then over here, this is headlights, horn, voltage regulator, and that kind of stuff. So we're gonna focus on this first. We're gonna kind of pull it back a little bit and then feed new wires. Okay, so this is the front driver's side headlight. You can see where the harness comes in up there from the fender and goes over to the headlight, and there's a waterproof grommet up there which we don't have included in our kit, and this wiring looks pretty good, and it's been actually undercoated. I think what we're going to do is splice into it on the other side of the fender where it comes through, and then we don't have to worry about that waterproof fitting there. We could rip all this apart, but as you can see, it's been undercoated and everything, and it would be quite the battle to get in there, and I'm not ready to do that right at this moment. So I think what we're going to do is splice into it on the other side of the fender up there, since those wires appear to be okay. Oh, this car has an electric fan up here too, and that's what some of this new wiring loom up here is. So some of that we're going to, obviously we don't have that in the kit, so we're going to check the condition and probably leave that in place for the most part. But there's some wire nuts and things here that we're not going to keep them. Okay, so Copeland survived first contact with the enemy, so it turns out actually the way this wiring harness is constructed, we got to start the dimmer switch to wire the headlights, because that's where they started their harness. This is the dimmer switch, and you have to feed it through that way first and then go out to the headlights. So we have to pull this brand new dimmer switch out, which has been unfortunately sealed in place. Well, this is unfortunate. we got with the headlight dimmer switch is the plug that they gave us is wrong for the dimmer switch we have. So we've basically got to reuse the molded plug that comes with this, or replace the whole dimmer switch, which I don't feel like doing because obviously the plug they gave us is 3 tight together and these are widespread. So what we're going to do is reuse this plug and splice in our existing harness. We've got our connections spliced in here, and then on the other end of the harness we're going to cut off their plug and we're going to put on our own spade connectors. Basically that's the plug we're going to be using then for the dimmer switch. And we can actually plug this in here and tighten these down. I had to loosen these because you got to get that plug in and there's not enough space to do it without loosening these screws. So it's actually a new dimmer switch that somebody had previously replaced. I guess the wires go through here, so that'll actually work out pretty good. So we got 3 wires here, and they're using brown, red, and blue. Blue is supposed to go to the switch, so that one's not run through the firewall, obviously. But we have run the red and brown through the firewall, which is your high and low beam out. There's one. One of these has to be correct, right? Ah, there we go. That is G, in case you were wondering. I'm sure you weren't. We'll probably just cut this part out of the final video anyway. Because we have spade connectors, if we mess this up, we can reconnect it as necessary. But from what I've been able to discover, this is in from the switch, and this is this red and yellow one here. Put those together, and you can see these plastic covers kind of mesh together. I like these connectors a little better than some because they're insulated on both sides, and you know, they're harder to mess up. So got them plugged in. So now what we're gonna do, for now, this goes to the switch. We're gonna leave that kind of coiled up there, I guess, for lack of anything better to do with it. And obviously we'll loom these wires better when we get everything where we want it. Oh, I'm gonna need a flashlight maybe. Getting dark. Now I can screw this plate in and then we'll have our wires pulled up.
I did not
Good.
Gonna this light flashlight upside your head in a minute.
Okay, so we got our dimmer switch in here. All we have to do is kind of feed these wires through some more. So this is the old wire. I'll make sure to just kind of keep that up there for the moment. Back around that. Okay, so our voltage regulator it's different than the original one. This is the newer style, but the older style has kind of a tripod bolt arrangement. This has 2 bolt holes, but none of the 2 actually align, so we're gonna try to do it with one because that's what we got. I am gonna leave the original screws in there in case anybody ever wants to put this back to its stock configuration. They'll have the brackets and the screws to do it. Will they be able to find a voltage regulator? I doubt it. So these 2 loose ones here, we're just gonna run down tight into the bracket. And that's how it's gonna be. It's nice and tight, it won't vibrate. And we have our wires coming back here. As we run our wires down here that are going to be our new loom, we're gonna zip tie these in place. But we have our fan wires here that we have to take into account also. And since I don't want a whole lot of separate looms here, we're going to kind of include these as we go. just going to kind of put these lightly in place as placeholders for now as we run our new wires through this loom, because we only have a layout and we kind of have to run the wires one by one. So for now, this is the way we're going to do it. So these go up to the headlights, these go to your voltage regulator. I want everything to be kind of visually held together so that I'm aware of what's going on here. These go to the fan. I believe this is the ground for the fan as well. Should probably strip this off and figure out what's going on here before we make assumptions. Ow. Cut your finger off. Let's see what we have here. Got lots of electrical tape. Appears to be some kind of junction in here. That's always a good thing. Not really. No, I don't like lots of junctions. Oh, well, that's great. Lots of butt splices. I could just leave all this in place and it won't be the most professional looking thing, and I don't like it because we got stuff like this that I'm taking apart right now that's full of taped splices and a mix of different connectors and wires going forwards and backwards on top of each other needlessly, and I would just rather not have that since we're going to redo the rest of the harness. This fan they put in, oh, that's great. One of those Scotch connectors things. Oh, that's great. We just got that wire, doesn't even go anywhere. Oh, why did they run it? See, this is why you got to strip this stuff apart. You don't know what you're getting into. So these are the only two wires that actually go to the fan. And we got, I don't know, they must have had a lot of extra or something, so this is what they did with it. So this wire doesn't actually go to anything, interestingly. That's a spare. This is what you don't want to do. This here, I don't even know what they're doing, but anywho, this is a ground connection. This was going to here, and of course they have about 6 feet of extra wire, and then they go from red to black with the wrong type of splice, and we'll redo that. This isn't a circuit breaker, is it? Maybe it is. Oh, 40 amp. It is a circuit breaker. Okay, so we're gonna have to put this in line. What they did basically here, it looks like for power, it looks like they have, I don't know, power coming in from the voltage regulator, and then there's a switch in the cab, and it just goes through here, and I don't know. I'm confused already. Oh, and this is great. We got another electrical tape connection here. So what we actually have is the black to red and the red to black. Well, that's fantastic. Oh, I know why they did that, because it's a pusher fan in front of the radiator. So they wired it backwards so that it's spinning the opposite direction and pushing air rather than pulling it. So that's why they did that. But I want to take this tape off. No, I don't. Yes, I do. No, I really don't. I don't know. Okay. We'll worry about that when we get to it, but at least we know what's there for the moment. I mean, nothing good. So we'll just leave that. This here, the other end of the fan, they just used wire nuts, which, you know, that's exactly what you want to do in an automotive application. No, it's not. Strippers. You gotta have strippers. Basically, when this is laying down here, we'll have the exact proper length there for that wire. They had it, they just didn't know what to do with it, I guess. So what's this wire hanging here? Oh, this must have come apart from their great connection here. Yeah, that just pulled out while it was just laying there. Okay, so we don't actually need any more wire length here, I don't think. We might actually have too much as it is. We can shorten it later if we need to. Okay, so there's our one connection to our fan. Now, the reason I did this here is, I don't know if I said it, but if anybody ever needed to replace the fan, it was really hard to do before. But now we've just got plugs on there, so you can just put new spade connectors on your new fan and just plug it in without going to any enormous trouble. So runs around a lot of hot stuff like the radiator, and this wire loom is more than decorative. It'll protect it from heat and stuff, so that's a good thing. So we're on day 2 now. Progress update. We spent a lot of time yesterday trying to just figure out some of the layout and how we were gonna, you know, planning, so that kind of stuff. So we've got a lot of the harness here laid out. This is going to go to the rear. These are lights, light harness to the rear. As we got our light switch feed here, but we don't have quite that set up yet, but we have everything set to length. We got the driver's side fender harness mostly laid out. That's what all this is. We're going to put in wire loom when we're done, but we got to hook up the horn switch. We need bullet connectors for that. We got to get the fittings and the brake switch. And we got to splice in the parking lights. That's what these wires are. And then we'll be laid out for the driver's side, and we can move around over to the passenger fender and the ignition and all that. And that's a lot more wires to pull, so let's get into it. Just crimp it hard enough that your teeth crack. That's what you want. Ooh, cobwebs and spiders, oh my. Okay, that's our parking lights. I can get all that tied up. Should hold her till we can get wire loom on it. Left a little service loop here because we might extend these grounds and kind of feed some more length down inside the front there. But we'll determine that later. All right, so we're starting to lay out our interior harness here a little bit. All of this mess goes to the fuse block and relay panel. So I'm starting to bundle these based off of location where they go. Even though the wires are labeled roughly, each set that I've bundled goes to a different location so that I know that they have to be split off. So just for organizational purposes, we might not leave all these zip ties on here permanently, but for the moment, this is how we're going to organize this so that we don't get anything mixed up, because you know, you don't want to get your wire lengths wrong or anything, or trimmed wrong or any of that business. So for the moment, we're going to bundle these things so that they don't get tangled. So this isn't complete. We still have a few more to run into the engine compartment, and then we can take care of all the gauges and everything. We don't quite have everything ready to go to the fuse panel either. And we haven't determined the fuse panel location where we're going to put it yet, but some of that might be determined by wire length. Some of these wires, they didn't give us very much length, so I'm not quite sure where that's going to go yet. When we get to that point, we will figure that out, but for the moment, organization is key. So right now, this what goes to our steering column. This is our headlight switch, and this is our ignition switch. This isn't an exact harness for this vehicle, so I'm not even sure. We might have to change these connectors. I'm not sure how that's going to work yet, but for the moment, that's how everything's laid out. We don't have anything for the wipers. There's the wiper switch in this car. Wipers over here. We don't actually have anything for the wiper switch, so I'm not sure how that's going to work yet. Here's that electric fan toggle switch I was talking about earlier. This is, you know, on and off for your electric fan. We're going to make that look a little bit, well, a lot bit better if we can. And so now we need to finish running to our starter and ignition connections. We're going to jumper 3 and 4 because we don't have a neutral safety switch. So that means when you click your key to start, it's going to power the light blue ignition switch 4 wire, go through here, and then it's going to power the solenoid on the purple starter 3 wire. So, and that is going to connect battery power to the starter. Now, we still need power from this, we still need a switched power source for our ignition coil, ballast resistor, and our distributor. So, switched 12 volt power. That's going to be our coil feed here. Wait, orange. ignition, coil feed here. So orange coil feed 1. Is what we're going to use to power this. So these are our labeled wires in this kit. So our ballast resistor is going to be coil feed 1, and our starter solenoid is going to be purple starter 3. Okay, I think that's everything we need to know. Yeah, that's not actually orange coil feed 1, that's resistor 1. They call it one thing on the wiring diagram and they call it another thing on the wire, so that's another great thing about this thing. So this orange resistor wire, so let's go over to our car. So this is going to go to our starter solenoid, and this is going to go to the other end of our ballast resistor. So I'm going to temporarily plug that in. There's another connection that's going to go to this for the actual distributor, because this is a Mallory Unilite. So, but we'll get to that. And then this, of course, is going to go to down here. I don't know, this is a 2-terminal thing here, but I believe I sort of had it preliminarily connected. Somebody else had run like 1 or 2 wires on here, and that's where they had it. So for now, I'm going to put it there, although I don't know. I don't see a label R or I on this terminal, but if we turn the key and nothing happens, I'll move it to the other terminal. So that's our start and run circuit. Alright, so we're starting to loom up the wires now. We've double and triple checked the wiring diagram, so we should have all the wires run, but you know, as soon as you do this, then you find one you missed. But this is for the horn, goes down here to the horn, and we need bullet connectors for the brake switch, and then we can loom them up. And we're running loom over to the other side across the back of the engine. We're going to run it thusly, held up in the stock position of the firewall above the engine here. And then let's move to the other side. Over here, so we've got everything wired up according to how Mallory specifies it, not the electrical diagram that we got, because the electrical diagram we got is wrong. So we've got our tack wire on the negative side of the coil, we got our ballast resistor to the coil, and we've got ignition to the coil, ignition power, and or to the ballast resistor. I don't know, it's on the wiring diagram. Got our start solenoid hooked up, and this is our horn wire over here. It's wired a little different. The horn relay from the factory goes right here, and everything happens here, but the relay is on the fuse block in this one, so it's just one wire back to the fuse block. So we're going to keep going on this wire loom. I did change, when they wired the distributor, they just wired the distributor just straight across right to the coil, which is not a great way to do it. So I ran it along with the factory alternator wiring and everything back to the main harness, and then back around and across. So there'll just be that one leg across the engine, feeding the engine in the rocker arm valley there, the valve cover valley there. And then that should be about it. We're going to have this up out of the way, supported at the factory wiring loom position here, and everything will just feed nice and easy onto the fender. So that'll be it for the engine, then we can move to the inside. Alright, so we got the engine compartment pretty much done. This loom is done. This runs over here to all your starting circuitry, ignition coil. We moved the ballast resistor down a little bit. They give you a new one in this kit, which is one of the few things they actually give you. And the solenoid's down there, of course, so everything should be set up and ready to go there. And that loom is all wrapped and done, you've already seen. And we didn't change the windshield wiper loom, we're just going to leave that. They didn't give us new wires for that. Okay, so we got our new wire bundle coming in here. This is the switch for the electric fan. You know, the more I look at that, that just looks all kinds of safe, doesn't it? Well, I don't know if we're going to install that anywhere. I wish I had a little bracket to mount down here. I'll look for something. I got brackets and stuff, but we can make a bracket. Just because there's already holes drilled in here. We don't have to change the factory holes. So the rest of these wires are all our new bundle, going in and out mostly to the fuse panel, but from the switches and stuff. So we're going to start to split those off into individual circuits. Most of it's going to go right, you know, up here in the control panel. So most of it's going to be in this area. There's going to be some sub harnesses that are going to go over to the radio and stuff, but for the most part, and we're going to have to add some power circuits for our aftermarket stuff like our tack and our gauges here, as well as some light circuits. But other than that, we should be fine. The fan's already wired. If we had battery power, we could just snick this and the fan would come on. It's kind of its own system, and I kind of left that. I just integrated it into the new harness. Other than that, and then the rear harness, of course, but we've already got that split off, and we'll do that last. Next step is to figure out where we want our fuse panels. So we're going to kind of crawl up there under the dash, and I guess we can put this kick panel back in. The kick panel is kind of interesting. Somebody kind of made their own backing with their own backing board here, and it just kind of slides in there. It's actually a pretty slick little snug fit thing kind of there, but not factory. What do we got? We got light switch. We got a new replacement light switch, so we're going to be taking out this whole light switch, and then this unit is going to go up there with the new one. And this is our old harness.
Lighting is horrible.
This is the section that I had to cut it to come through the engine compartment, just because, well, I wasn't going to fight that through. So this is the harness that went through to the engine compartment. Just snicked it off. So we're going to start kind of working our new harness in with our old harness. We're not going to disconnect everything all at once and pull it, because there's aftermarket stuff worked in here the same way. So we're going to kind of put our locate our fuse panel, and then we're going to kind of start working circuits alongside and parallel the existing circuits before we pull the old out, kind of like we did in the engine compartment. Same concept. So next step, figure out where we want the fuse panel. So we're going to put our fuse panel right down here in the middle. There's ordinarily a bracket that mounts here to hold the ducts together, and we're going to mount our fuse panel right up there where the bracket would normally go, and it'll be hidden behind the dashboard. So I know you can't see very well down here because it's dark, and you know, my flashlight isn't doing the best job, but anyway, this bracket, we're going to try to keep this bracket behind the fuse panel because it's an original bracket. So we'll keep it back there, and we'll just get longer screws, and we'll put the panel right on top of it. And it'll be hidden because when you're sitting in the seat, ordinarily you can barely even see the bottom of that duct there. So, and this will be well up above that. It'll be more like, well, there you can see the top screw there from here through the radio slot. So it'll be like hidden back behind there. But then when you want to change your fuses or your relays, you can just come down here and look at it, and we'll give you a better shot of that when we have it actually installed. We fabricated a fan switch bracket that we're going to mount. There's two factory screws right there. We're going to mount it up here, and then the fan will go through the hole on it there. The lighting isn't so great, but and then that'll just kind of be hidden below the dash, but you know, we didn't write on it in Sharpie or anything, so it'll look a little more professional than it was before. Got our fan switch installed. So now we just got to run the rest of the wires, this whole massive bundle, over to our fuse panel, and some various other connections, gauges and radio and so forth. Wiring up the ignition switch. We've got the wiper switch installed. We've got the headlight switch installed. That, of course, is just a plug in this application because we're replacing the light switch. This is our bundle here for the rear wiring. This is where the rear wiring goes for this car. It goes down under the floor mat and back here through the center. There, that'll work. It's gonna come over here. We'll get to that when we get to it. So, progress update. We have the fuse panel mostly wired in, and you know, it's very hidden up there. It's going to be the relays that I haven't plugged in yet, but other than that, most of the wires are run except for the gauges and some of the lights. The dome light, this switch that comes with this kit, actually sends out a ground signal when you turn the dome light on, and that's not what we need. This system actually works off of a positive signal, and the light has the ground itself. So I'm gonna put my foot over the door switch here to turn it off, and then we don't have our proper light switch rod yet, so I'm gonna turn this to dome light on, and there we go. You can see that works. And the way we made that work was we just ran power through this relay, and you know, so we can send a positive signal out instead of a negative to the light when that switch is flipped. So that just clicks into the harness with bullet connectors here, since we're keeping the existing door switch and dome light harness. So that will activate our dome light with the switch turned like it's supposed to work, and this relay will just be back here under the dash. So we've got a wire in our, still got a wire in our gauge cluster, and some of the lights for the gauges, and these, and the lights that light up the controls and the thermostat and everything. We got to put those lights in. We've got to put the radio back in, and our clock, which we did not get working. It's got a spring. It actually works except for a spring, so that won't work, but we'll put that back in along with its accompanying light, and then all that will work. We have to put, haven't run the choke wire to an ignition source yet, and we're waiting on the turn signal switch. It was bad. The switch was good, but the harness is connected. It runs down through a tube here. It had a crimp where they ran it through the tube wrong at some point. Somebody did some revision work, and the wires were bad. So since we had this all apart anyway, to check the switch, we just decided to order a whole new switch. So we're waiting on that. We can put that in, and then we can just get our connector hooked up there to the turn signal switch. This is for our radio. That's just positive, negative. The speakers are already wired up, and that should be it for that. Oh, the wipers work. I don't know if I showed that being tested yet. And we can't test the actual headlights yet because I don't have the proper switch for that to pull them in and out. The ignition works. I don't have the key with me at the moment to test that, but it'll turn the engine over, and got all the coil wired in correctly, so we know that'll work. Incorrectly? So that's our status update, and we are waiting on, we're going to replace all of the little individual lights and sockets in here with probably newer LED lights. And we got a wire in our cigarette lighter, which is pretty much cut and dried. It just grounds to the bezel here, and you just run a positive connection to either a keyed ignition source or a battery ignition source, depending on what you want. I think because this is an old car and it's going to get driven rarely, I'm going to put it to a keyed source so it's not live all the time, so you can't accidentally run the battery down by leaving anything plugged in. And the same for the radio and a lot of these other things, as much as possible, obviously, because if it's going to be sitting for a while, we don't want the battery to run down. So, oh, and our engine fan works. We just have to check and make sure that's turning in the right direction, which I did not do yet. This is a pusher fan, which, oh good, it is actually pushing, so we got it wired correctly. It's just an auxiliary fan. Turn that off. And there's the bracket that we installed for that. We didn't drill anything because this is an old car, and I don't like putting in non-factory holes. There's 2 screws there that hold the e-brake bracket, and we just used those screws behind there to hold that bracket on. And this auxiliary gauge cluster also uses factory screws that come from the vent that runs through here, the floor vent, not floor vent, cowl vent. So it's actually, you know, and the tack they put on with a hose clamp, worm gear clamp. So, and we're going to put that back on like that too. That way there won't be any holes or anything drilled in this, and it'll be all original. So that's where we're at. We're going to keep moving along here. We're going to, I think, do the cigarette lighter and some of these ancillary things next, run them over to our fuse panel, and then we'll be good. Our wiring harness went in nice. It's threaded back through there, and we're going to run just one more auxiliary harness for the dash lights. They're going to be in their own harness because they're going to run kind of along the front here behind everything, behind all the gauges, all the length of the dashboard. So they're gonna be in their own wire loom and everything. So on to the next step. So project update. We finally got in our horn switch wire and our turn signal wire. And since it's really hard to feed the horn wire through, we've got this temporary wire threaded up from the bottom because there's kind of a gap there before the tube hits the casing. So when you go down, it kind of flops around in there before you hit the other hole. So it's actually easier to thread it up, tie the two together, and then pull it down through. So we're going to fasten this to our fish wire, and we're going to pull it down through. Then we're going to put the turn signal and the column back together. And then we can wire in our turn signal wires. This is a bullet connector. So what I'm doing here is just putting it right into the end of the bullet connector to add a little bit of tension. I don't want it to pull right out. You know, it probably will, but and I'll make sure it's held together really good. What you don't want is it pulling out as soon as you hit a snag. And make sure that it's gripping both wires as tight as possible, because when you start pulling on it, as soon as you hit a snag, it's just going to want to separate at the weakest point. So hopefully didn't make the tape too thick. We'll find out. Let's go down here to the engine compartment side. So what we got here is, here's the end of our wire threaded through, so we're just gonna start to pull it out. See, the horn wire comes out right out the end of the steering box because it goes all the way down through the column. So we're just gonna gently massage it out of there. Gently. And we've got horn wire. So now we can take this tape and everything off. Okay, now we got our fresh horn wire, and we have our horn connection here. Let's pop that in, and then we are ready to roll. And what you don't want, this, since this comes out right down by the exhaust manifold, you got to make sure it stays separate. So if you have to wire tie it or something, make sure you do, and make sure it doesn't get caught in the steering arm. So then you're good. So okay, we got our horn wire run. I bring you around here to the steering wheel. As you can see, it's pulled in place, and our horn button is right there with the proper springs. When we put the wheel on, when you press down on the horn button, it'll ground this out. Alright, so we got turn signal mounted. We have to put the lever on, but the wire's threaded through. Goes through the lower hole, in case you're wondering. We did take off the bullet connectors, and we put this on because we're going to put on a plug to match the new harness, rather than just use the individual bullet connectors. It's just they send it, so we're going to use it. So the way this works is you move your lever up and down, and this clicks like this. Now with the old one, the old switch, this actually has the detent as part of the switch, so it was a little loose. So when you put it in one position, it would kind of want to click. There wasn't any positive detent, it was just down or up and middle, and you couldn't hardly see or feel where the middle was other than just, you know, horizontal. So this actually has better detents because it's new plastic. So we're going to put the lever on. This goes on, and then there's a screw that holds it on in the middle. For the rear harness, the way the harness runs in this vehicle is it runs down this side inside the fender and quarter here, and then it runs around the back, down under the carpet and up, and then comes out in the center. That's those wires hanging down there that you can see right here. What we're going to do is we're going to run it, rather than pull all the seat and the carpet out and make it completely inaccessible like the factory harness, we have enough wire that we're going to run it over and down and along the side here, along the rocker, and then back up, and there's a hole back there where we can get in, and at a panel that covers that. So that's going to feed all the way back through our fender back here to the tail light, and then the way the factory harness goes is it feeds over to the passenger side on this wire here. So, and the gas tank wire is right down, this yellow wire right down here. So same thing there. We're going to run those in the factory positions. So we're just going to pull the harness back through here. The only real tough part is this part is hard to get to, but that's fine. We'll just thread it back through here, and once we have it back here, we can replace it with the factory harness. We'll probably cut the factory harness, splice them together, and then use the existing harness as a fish. And then the way you access these tail lights is if you pull the back off, you can access the bulb, but you can't access the actual harness. So there's these access panels on each side here that you pull off, and you can reach back in there and get to the harness, which we'll do. So that's how we'll do the rear. Well, this, I don't know what this was. We pulled this out when we pulled that panel off. It's just hanging down in there. That's part of why we're redoing the harness in this vehicle. There's just all kinds of mystery things. As far as the gauge cluster goes, we did some testing and the voltage regulator was bad, so we've got to order another one of those. We're getting there. All right, so rear wiring harness. So we fed it from the main bundle down through here under the carpet, along the edge here, it's under there, and back through here, and we pulled out the old harness and we've taped them together, and we're gonna pull them through there so to feed the new harness to the back, and then we can put this kick plate back on and it'll be like we were never there. So far we cut the old harness there where it comes through under the carpet so we could pull it out to feed it, and part of it is still hanging here. That's the only part of the harness we haven't pulled out yet of the old harness. We'll get to that. We may end up leaving that. I don't know how tight it's jammed under the seats there, but we will see. So we're gonna pull this back through, and then most of our wire pulls will be complete. So we have the gauge cluster ready to be wired. That's what this bundle is here. We got indicator lights, which is turn signals and high beams. We got fuel gauge, and we got power, and we have dash lights here, which are going to plug into this block here, which goes to all of our inside lights at the gauge cluster, and all of the lights here and here and down on these gauges and the tack. The rear is installed. We're in it under this lip here where it's supposed to go. The original, there's metal clips in here that snap up in and hold it in. They're gone. We used black cable ties here. Maybe we can find some clips, maybe not, but they're holding it in right now. And it's a black car, so you can't really see it. don't know if you can see it down in here, but the rear lights are complete as well. That's all rewired. It does have license plate lights. They're just way out here on the bumper. Just kind of weird, both sides. Didn't check the bulbs yet. Not sure if they work, but the only thing that remains here then, since all that is in, is to install the gauge cluster into the hole there. And we're still waiting on the light switch. We needed a longer light switch stalk, and we're waiting on that. And I individually tested all the lights and circuits for the lights, so we know they work. The only thing we haven't tested is actually pulling the stalk out, because it's not long enough yet. So we're going to install the gauge cluster and then put the steering wheel back on. And again, we know all this works because we tested it. And I believe that should be it. The only real question yet is remaining the high beam circuit, because there's the regular headlights and high beams on this switch down here, and we might have to switch those two wires, but that's easy enough. You can just pull that carpet up and switch the wires, because we put spade connectors on there. And again, I don't know which way it was meant to be wired, so we might have to switch that over, because it's not labeled like high beams, low beams. It's labeled headlight 1, headlight 2. So we're gonna find out, and if it's wrong, you know, if the dash indicator comes on when you hit low beam, you know, or whatever, then we'll do that. So I don't know that that really matters, because it's like 2 filaments. Anyway, we're going to put the gauge cluster back in, and then other than final testing, and we still got to put that kick panel back in. We'll wait to see whether we got to switch those wires and the 2 plates in the bed by the tail lights, once we make sure all those wires are a-okay, and then we should be ready to rock and roll. All the interior lights are working. And headlights are working. And the high beams and the high beam indicator are on the dash. And the turn signals work and everything. Fuel gauge works. All our gauges down there work. And of course the dome light. So we should be pretty much done with this thing now. Just a few more tune-up items and then she'll be ready to roll. Oh, and the horn.
Children on bicycles.
Where? Where are the children on bicycles?
Somewhere.
They won't be on bicycles for long! The brakes are about as good as they were in my
Oh my goodness.
Mustang. Come on, get out of the road now.
Well, what do you think?
Love it. Oh yeah, that 428 wants to sing.
Oh, BPS.
Uh-oh. Watch out, Up's truck. Also, that'll wrap up this project. Everything else is pretty much done. We put new plug wires and spark plugs in it. All except the coil wire. They didn't give us one long enough, so that's been reused, but she's all rewired, and well, that'll wrap up this one. If you like what we're doing, feel free to subscribe, and you can always like and comment. That helps us out and tells us whether we're doing a good job and doing things that you guys want to see. So just let us know, and if you have any comments about this car, or maybe you have a Ranchero or you want to talk about it, or maybe you have questions about the specific car, just drop it in the comments down below and let us know. And thanks for sticking with us, and we'll see you next time.